Well, first of all, welcome to the Midland Cemetery. Let's take a walk through this place. Midland Cemetery, just to give you a little background about it, it's approximately 210 years old, and it is the only black cemetery in our area.
This was part of the old Kelka farm. And when you think about it, there's no other cemeteries within miles of this place that were around here that early. But I can only assume that Mr. Kelker was the person that allowed maybe his slaves or his caregivers to his property, the farm that was here, a place to be buried at. As far as any other owners, I can just name Mr. Dunkel from the late 1800s. And all right, Mr. Dunkel was big in the political arena around here, and he was a man who was out to make money. And him, along with the some of the other people here in the area, got together and decided that they were going to plot this off and sell it off for their own gain. And when that all dried up, because there was no more burial spots to be had around here, then they let it go. This is a schematic view of all the plots. This is a copy of the original map from 1924, when Mr. Amos Dunkel was trying to sell as many of the plots for as few amount of spaces as he had. This cemetery plot is showing that there is maybe 2 or 3 bodies in each grave, and we're not sure about the exact figures right now, but it can be up to 1,500 bodies in this 3.5 acres of land. We have United States colored troops buried all throughout the cemetery, and this is the guys who fought in the Civil War, 1863 to 65. And these guys are just getting their just dues, you know. So we also have the Buffalo Soldiers, which are from the Western Campaign, and they too fought against the Indians and the Mexicans, trying to bring more land to good old United States. Well, we also have the Tuskegee Airmen out here who fought during World War II. And in between that, we have all those of the Spanish-American War, the Cuban, skirmishes and stuff like that. That's all buried out here. World War I and the Korean War. So we have quite a few military people out here for the size of the place, and then we also have those that we haven't been able to find and locate, you know. This thing, it was like back in 1991, there was a blizzard, a little storm going on down here in Stilton, actually in this part of the country. And because of the way that the streets were blocked off, I was rerouted, trying to figure out how I was going to get home. So my son at the time was like a little short guy, and we decided to go through what is known as Kelker Street to see if we could get another route to come down here, because all the other routes were closed. And the only way to come was down through Kelker Street through all that snow, and that's when I looked over at the Midland Cemetery. First time that I can recall seeing some headstones at that time, you know, and to look over it, because all the weeds and the natural greenery that you normally would see, you know, during the spring and the summer, obviously was gone because it was laden with snow. So you saw these tall pillars of what I consider tall monuments. I'm like, oh my God, that is a graveyard in there. It was like an awakening for me. And that's when I said to my son that about his grandfather, or my grandfather rather, being buried there. And I didn't know where he was buried. I still don't know where he's buried at to this day. I have an approximate area where he might be located at. But I thought if I got together with my son and we could go up there, and seeing that he was a little boy and really rambunctious anyway, that we could pull the weeds off of this possible spot and get it cleaned up before spring. That's how I got started. And that was the beginning. Every Memorial holiday, they would leave me in the car. They would get out the car with the flowers and the water, and they would go up the little hill into the cemetery and disappear on me. As a kid, I would just sit there in the car, like, are they coming back? I didn't know, but they didn't allow me to go into it because of my allergies, and it was so thick with weeds and trees and everything. You could not see not a single monument. So it was my day of awakening, to what Midland was all about. It created an interest. It created a moment of saying, well, what am I going to do, and who is responsible for cleaning up this cemetery, and why did they leave it go like this, And next thing I know, I was looking in the documentation of the courthouse and looking everywhere I can possibly go. I was sneaking out of work to go to the courthouse to get documents and do research and calling people and trying to find out what to do and how to do it. And I went public, and from that point on, here I am, doing my work.
Our first workers were community workers, the conservationists. They came from the State Department, and they were helpful in cutting down quite a few of the trees. And they were so thrilled about helping the first time, they came back 4 times totally, to help cut down the trees. And we're talking about on an average of 40 men each time. So imagine, if you will, 40 men each time times 4. That was a lot of trees to be cut. So all the area that we're looking at on this side was totally loaded with trees, and a lot of the headstones that you'll look at later were covered or embedded inside of the tree, where the tree actually grew up around it. And a lot of headstones were down under the dirt, where you never even knew that there was a headstone there, Glenn Blue back here, they've just dug him up, and I shouldn't say dug him up, but dug up the headstone, and it was embedded in 3 large trees, and the roots were awful, so they had a hard time, getting that out. And it looks good. They leveled it off and put some grass seed around it, and it's just coming along, So our biggest asset right now, our biggest, as you call it, in-kind expenses here, is the Dauphin County prisoners. They have done a tremendous job of pulling out stumps after stump, and they're seeding for us, putting down the grass seeds that we purchase, and mowing the lawn and keeping it maintained, and expanding the cemetery as we go, because every time they pull up a weed or a tree, it's showing up a new headstone, So they've done a lot of work, and I have to give them a lot of credit.
So did any of the men, any of the inmates also get interested in the actual history?
Oh my, yes. We've had volunteers from the prisoners, as they've gotten released from the prison, to come back and do a little bit of work here and there. And some of them have found out, because they are prisoners from Dauphin County and they're residents of the area, they found out that they have grandparents buried here, which they didn't know about. The old time storytelling that we used to hear, when I used to hear growing up, is not given to the young people anymore like it used to be, or they don't want to listen. They're too busy in the videos and whatever. And when they come out here, I get to talking about the history, and I listen to their last names, and I said, well, isn't your grandmother a member of such and such a church or whatever? And they said, oh yeah. And I said, well, do you realize that your great-grandmother is buried here, or your great-grandfather is buried here? And so it's like an acquaintance of their history. They really enjoy that, and it makes them work even harder, because now they're taking care of something that belongs to them. It's a place where you can find a lot of treasures, and like I tell the men, every headstone, take care of it, because that's one book. It's a book of history, and if you go and research it in the archives and You know, you just take the time to look at the name, and you go and look for death certificates and birth certificates and marriage licenses and everything else that goes along with that person. Maybe find an ancestor or a descendant of that person. You're going to find a lot of wonderful information here, you know. So,
well, it's a cemetery that most of the community of Stilton are buried here. Most of our ancestors are my mother and father are buried out here, my brother, and then most of the old pastors and deacons of the churches are buried here. And the founder of First Baptist Church, which I'm a member, he was buried here. He's buried here.
But I do have my mother, my brother, and my grandfather, grandmother, aunt, and I have another brother, Raymond. And so there's quite a few. Some I know and some I don't know.
To Midland. I have my father and two brothers, an aunt and my grandfather are all buried in Midland Cemetery.
Yeah.
That's my husband right here.
That's her husband.
My husband.
Oh, your husband?
Uh-huh.
Oh, that's your husband out there.
Uh-huh.
Oh, uh-huh. But this is your mother,
Yeah, that's my mom.
and that's your husband.
Uh-huh.
Okay. This is Uncle Bill and then Sarah.
Uh-huh. And Oscar. And my
Uncle
grandmother.
Bill and Sarah and Oscar.
Yes,
Well, it
four.
should be four, eh?
It is four of them there.
Well, who? That's Uncle Bill and Aunt Celie,
Sarah
Sarah,
and Uncle Oscar.
and Ashley. That's four.
Yes, four.
They're happy. You know, I'm getting responses of, you know, they are very happy that, you know, somebody's doing something. And also I'm teaching them something about their history too. Because some of the families didn't even know they had, you know, the Buffalo Soldiers or the United States Colored Troops in them. You know, I'm teaching them a lot about the history.
I went with Barbara when she originally started on this, but after I found out that she was doing this, I volunteered right away. Mainly because of my parents, and also because of the history. Because, like I said, I know I know a lot of people there.
So, when we look at African American history, when we look at this project, this is part of American history.
Look around, we see people are here because they want to be here. They want to restore something. They want to learn from restoration. And when you learn from restoration, you learn history backwards and it comes forward. And this may be a small project, but it says we want to know more about our ancestors. We want to salute them. We want to tell them thanks, because we're going to do all we can to keep this great America free, and it's going to be free for many, many years if we honor those who honored us.
Every time I'm out there, I shouldn't say every time I'm out there, every year we find a new headstone. Every year I find new information on these people or on a person I didn't know that was out there. Every year it's just something else. It's the continuation of the awakening.
Beneath overgrown trees, entwined in clinging vines, she came also from some point in time to rest at Midland. Among ashes and dust and decay, they were laid in unattended graves with no one to remember except on Memorial Day. They were lost at Midland. Can you remember them by name? Those who died, free and slave, paving the way to a better day before resting at Midland. The hope of tomorrow, their children, their dream. we gave them courage to fight for things unseen. Surely, something is owed for the struggles that led to Midland. Is there anyone who really cares? Anyone with eyes to see and ears to hear? Whose heart does not cry out in despair at the devastation of Midland? Cry with me as a heritage dies, thrown aside in a heap of perishing black pride, lost in memories, lost in time. Oh, shame, shame, forgotten roots sigh. This is Midland.